what you need, still how you feel, just to keep it real. You never really needed anyone to tell you what to be or what you should do. This is your dream, what you wanted to be. You can be what you wanted to see in front of me. What you wanted to give, you have gave, saved by love and saved by love, saved by love, saved by Climb the ladder, how high do you get? No one will know when you get tired. Pull on through, can't tell just how much time we get. Wish that we knew if it's guidance you see. Look inside of you, what you wanted to be. You can be what you wanted to see in front of me. What you wanted to give, you have gave, saved by love and your saved by This is your dream. Right, go away. What you wanted to say, you can be what you wanted to say.
Okay, this is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, my guest is a guitar player that played as Zug Izland, that was out of the Detroit area. They were also signed to Psychopathic Records, which is operated by the members of ICP, I believe. And today, my guest is a guitarist from that band, Mr. Mike P. How you doing, Mike?
Good, how are you?
Good. Give me a little background on yourself, where you're from originally, and what attracted you to playing music?
I'm from Detroit, the east side, back in the day, when I was born. And then my mom was really into Elvis, like every Elvis record and Elvis thing you can imagine.
Sure.
So, I was kind of, I was brought up a lot around music, that kind of music, more popular music, rather than like underground jazz or something, My mom bought me a guitar when I was like 7 years old. So I started taking guitar lessons and just kept going from there, I took lessons up until I was 18, and then I went away to music school. I went to Berklee College of Music, so which of course is more lessons there. So I was just really into learning about music and knowing as much as I can, learning as much as I can. After Berklee, I ended up back in Detroit. Played in a bunch of different bands around Detroit, a ton of bands. I think maybe 10 or 12 different bands around Detroit. Some did well, and following and talking to record labels and managers and, had some deals and things like that. It was up and down, trying to survive. Playing in original rock bands was really hard. So in 1996, I got a job. Well, I actually got an internship at a place called Harmony Park Studios in downtown Detroit. And so I started interning there. And after 1 week, they put me on the payroll, which was really cool. Because I already had some experience making records and mixing records and stuff. So they hired me as an engineer and started making all kinds of records there, all kinds of different artists, a lot of R&B and hip-hop, rap records, rock, country, everything you can imagine. Some jazz. Did that for a number of years, and then I heard about Psychopathic Records looking for someone to run their studio and help build their studio. And I put all the gear together, build all the gear and figure out what they needed. I wasn't swinging a hammer or anything. Someone else did that. But before that, I was friends with Mike Clark, who was their original producer, day one. So he was really cool to help. But he was still around when I was there. But he was kind of I think it was just getting burnt out. He maybe needed a little time off. So I took over for him at the studio I built for Psychopathic Records, which was in Farmington Hills at the time. We just went to work like crazy hours. Even before that, working 50 to 70 hours a week, sitting behind a board. And then eventually that morphed into a computer. So just working like crazy hours at Psychopathic Records. It was just a really great time. They were really at their peak then. That was 2005-ish. We just worked like crazy. And one day I just had a CD of some tracks I made. I just goofing around. So I just recorded all the time at home, and so I played Violent J from IC. I was like, hey, check out these tracks I made. I wasn't trying to pitch him or anything.
Sure.
And he was just like, all right, cool. And then the next day he was putting vocals on tracks. He went home and wrote, he took the CD, he went home and wrote to him. So that was cool. And then all of a sudden he's like, you got any more? I'm like, yeah, I got hundreds, And he's like, so I would go to work for them in the daytime, 50, 70 hours a week. And then I would go home and write more tracks. Almost every day. That was my thing,
sure.
Which was just awesome.
Did you produce most of their stuff, the early stuff, or all of their stuff then?
No, not all of it, but a bunch of it. I think I got about 250 songs that I co-wrote and produced for them and the acts on their label at the time, plus at least another 100 that I produced for them that are kind of on hold, let's say. Lots of tracks. But Mike Clark was the original producer back in 1991, I think, all the way up to 2001. And then, he's still supposed to be doing their next record.
Oh, really? Do they still have the studio though in Farmington?
Do not. They sold the building, I think it was in 2018 or maybe 21, something like that. They sold the building. And it's just, I imagine they just didn't need it anymore. It was this enormous building. Right. Offices and a studio, and then it had a huge warehouse and semi-truck filled with stuff, sets and live show stuff. It was really cool. It was a huge compound. And they just kind of don't need all that stuff these days. They outsourced their merch. They have print-on-demand merch. Back then they had a warehouse and it was mostly filled with merch.
Right.
And a whole staff of people packaging up all the merch orders. I mean, there was 35 people working there back then. Around 2002, 2005. So. Right. And it was a really good time, man. Everyone was really cool. Everyone was this big coordinated effort.
Well, I know they were really big into merch and made a lot of merch. I mean, I recently did an interview with Bob from Rock of Ages. He told me, he goes, they constantly had merch, all sorts, and all types of different. And it's isn't that where it is today? I mean, you're going to make more money probably off of merchandise than you are off record sales. Because, I mean, everything's streamed.
Yeah, there's actually, even when artists were selling records, there was really no profit margin. Right. Hardly any, especially if a record label is involved. But merch, I know back in the day they would sell a T-shirt for $25 and pretty big markup. So, and then touring, could cost a lot of money. You get road crew and equipment and sets and things like that. So
lots of Fago.
They were lots of Fago, a whole lot of that too. Yeah, they were selling a lot of merch. A lot of underground acts, death metal to underground hip hop and underground stuff like that tends to sell more merch than mainstream stuff.
Right.
Oddly enough, they were. It was a huge thing. So
well, let's get back to you a little bit. How did the band Zug Izland come about? I mean, how did that start as far as the members? How did that come about?
Well, I kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but Violent J and I were kind of in between projects. We did like a few records at Psychopathic Records. Some of the artists. I was writing tracks, and he was writing the vocal stuff. The lyrics and vocal parts to them, and we were just goofing around. One of the first tracks that I mentioned that he put vocals on, he was trying to sing a part. He was like, "Man, you can't hit this part." He's more of a rapper than a singer.
Sure.
He sings a lot more since then, but she's like, "Man, anyone that could sing this part?" I'm like, "Yeah, my roommate." So I call him. I'm like, "Hey, get over to the studio and come sing this part." He's like, "All right." So he came over. He's just an awesome singer. So he comes over, sings this part, and then on another song, and then we just kept goofing around, just messing around, writing songs, and we were getting that guy to sing on them, and people were rapping on them, and then we had a meeting. We got down like 20 people into the studio, from the president of the record label to like internet guys, and just all these different people came in the studio. And we had half of the first Zug Izland record done, and we just played it for everyone. Like, "Yeah, what do you think?" And everyone just loved it. President of the label loved it, and they were like, "Let's do this." And so it was really just the three of us, me, Violent J, and the singer for Zug Izland, who his stage name is Sin. And we just kept messing around, finished up a record, and then we were close to being done with the record. And then we put a band together. We called just different people we knew. I called Ashley, who was the drummer for Reverend Right Time and the first Cousins of Funk. Guido Milligan on bass. He was a bass player for a bunch of different bands around Detroit. Gosh, who were they? Just a ton of bands. And then we got a guy named Dan on keyboards. He hadn't really been out yet at that time playing or anything. So we put the band together, and then we finished up, and we started adding more live stuff to the record, like live drums and bass, and adding these guys to it. And then boom, then we had a record. And then we're like, okay, now what? And originally we were going to kind of sell it off or license it to another label. Like we were talking to Roadrunner, was it Universal, and some major labels like that. And then the label ended up like, well, we're going to put it out ourselves. And, Psychopathic Records wanted to put it out. Cool. So they hired a radio marketing team, and they were out of Cleveland. And away we went. Started booking shows. We would go out on tour. Like we'd go out on a tour with Twisted. That's another act that is that was on Psychopathic Records. And they were, here's an act. They were packing theaters. I'm sure they still are back then. So we were opening up for them, and several other acts were going on out on these tours. And then we'd go out at ICP a little bit and play all their festivals and the Christmas show and the Halloween show and all that stuff. So we just got out, started playing a bunch, and then we got on different tours. Like we did 6 weeks on tour with opening up for King Zach. We did a tour with a band called Dope, and then just all kinds of other things, radio festivals, like every band you could ever imagine. Especially from that time, we were doing these big festivals with, because we were unknown to the Detroit people. We were on the radio all the time, all over the country. We'd be driving around from LA to Montana to Texas, wherever, and like every day we would hear ourselves on the radio.
Wow.
When we were on tour. It was going really good. So we were getting these big festivals with like Trap to Evanescence to 3 Days Grace to like all the bands that were out then, and some of them are still going now. So we were doing it. Then we'd go out and headline our own shows, and we were doing good all over the place in other cities. We were drawing hundreds of people every night, everywhere we went, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Being on an indie label and just being a band from Detroit.
If you're doing that kind of work and that kind of popularity, did you ever wonder why, or like some of these major labels didn't sign you guys, as far as like Roadrunner or any of the labels?
Well, as I mentioned, that was a plan, and then when it started happening, like something started coming through, and I and the band members, we didn't know about it. We were cool, like, dude, we'll just stay on Psychopathic Records. It's all good. But apparently, we did have some actual offers come through, and we didn't even know. Apparently, someone at the label shot it all down. So there was that. And then, but it was cool staying on Psychopathic Records. This is great.
Right.
We had this group of people and artists, and everyone was cool and friends and like family. And we were just like, man, this is our home. Let's stay here. And away we went.
Now, when you went out and did these tours, as you had mentioned earlier, this more or less came out of these songs that you've written, kind of experimented on with Violent J. Did he ever perform with you outside of ICP and as far as Zug Island?
He and they have, but like I mentioned, that there were like 7 different acts for a while on Psychopathic Records.
Right.
You know, and everyone was on everyone's rec. You know, like someone would just be walking into the office one day and be like, "Yo, jump in the studio here, and get on a verse." You're like, "Cool." It was kind of like that.
But did he ever perform with you live?
Yeah, it basically almost everyone has come up on stage with us and performed with us, but none of them have like officially like gone on tour with us, and you know, just like at different events like the Gathering of the Juggalos or Hollow Wicked or different things like that, or like, you know, we'd just be at some show and if someone was there, they'd jump on stage with us.
That's why I was wondering, because if you had been doing some shows with ICP, I had just wondered if some of those shows, maybe not all of them, if Violent J, you know, jumped onto the stage when you guys were performing and did some stuff.
Yeah, it was a little bit, not like not a ton, but and then if we were on tour or opening up for ICP, you know, any artist is not going to come out before their show. You know, they're like, they gotta get ready for the show, and and then their first hearings at their show has got to be their show. You know,
that makes sense.
You know, it was like somehow we would cross paths. Like I remember one time we were in like Iowa or something, and a bunch of people from Psychopathic, we were just like crossing paths on tour, and a bunch of them came out. And they'd jump on stage, and it was cool. It was all cool like that, you know.
One question I have to ask you, and I meant to ask you this a little earlier. If you remember your first show at Zug Island, and where would that have been?
Absolutely. St. Andrew's Hall, and that would be, gosh, I'm thinking, I know it was the fall of 2001, and it was an invite-only show, or like, not invite-only, but it was like a lottery. You had to like, it was like a lottery to get tickets to it. And it was like free tickets, but you had to like still kind of win them, you know? And it was great. It was a packed show, mostly juggalos, you know, and then other people who heard about it and wanted to see it.
How did they, go about advertising that or putting the word out that, hey, we're going to have this, like, you know, lottery or whatever for tickets?
Through their website. And also back then, you know, this is 2001, gosh, 24 years ago, there was also hotlines. Like everyone on the label had a hotline. You know, Zug Island had her own hotline, and so they would, a lot of stuff went through there. Like they would leave a message on the hotline, like, hey, everyone, like, you know, ICP is going, like, hanging out here tonight. Everyone meet us there. And, you know, 200 people would show up to go hang out somewhere, or just different things like that, or just leave messages on there, or like, oh, hey, this new record's coming out soon, check it out. So yeah, the hotline and the website was the main thing.
So how did that first show go? Do you remember? I mean, as far as the first live performance with this group?
I thought it was great. You know, we had a really great experienced band then. You know, we hadn't been together that long as a band, but some of the guys in the band really, they were just on point. They would listen to a song. You know, we made this record, and then we, including myself, had to go back and learn these songs.
Learn the songs.
I played them one time in the studio, and then we got to go play them live. I got to learn them. So, and the guys, they would just sit there and listen to the song one time, and then they'd play it, and it was like, oh, that was pretty much it. Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking you that, it's kind of a sideways question, if you excuse me on that. The reason I asked you how it went is because when you said the show was basically promoted through a lottery, through their Facebook page, through these hotlines, and I imagine a lot of juggalos were there, and you weren't a rap group. That's why I was wondering if you know, they were expecting something different or expecting something like in line with ICP.
Oh yeah. So you're asking about the crowd response?
Yes.
It was great. One thing that we did and the label did is we released some of the Zug Island songs for free on the internet, just to start to get people familiar with the band and the sound, and you know, because people aren't just going to show up to a show if they haven't heard anything.
Yeah, exactly.
They lived for Psychopathic Rex. Like they were like very dedicated fans, and still are. But it's good to have something in their head to recognize when they come to a show. So we released, honestly, before the record even came out, I would say half of the record was out for free on the internet, which I wasn't. We kind of needed to do that, like I say, to get people familiar with it. But we gave away too much for free because it was a year and a half later before the record was released. So they already had all this music, but we should have maybe just, you know, added added to the record, added new
Right.
songs or something. But whatever, it was cool. It worked out. They were showing up at our shows.
Right, that's the main thing, right?
Our music, yeah, they're already familiar with us.
Now, you had mentioned Earth earlier also when you were out on tours across the country that you hear yourselves on the radio out there. Were you not getting any kind of radio airplay here, even as far as like college at that time?
We were Riff, WRIF, and Doug Puwal, Meltdown. There was a bunch of people at Riff that were really awesome and very supportive of us. Really helped us out. But there were cities where we were in the top 5 played song in like major markets. That's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
People don't really realize it until you take songs and try to promote them to radio stations across the country. It's it's a difficult thing, difficult business.
That's why I was surprised that, like I say, a major, you said there was probably some major interest that Psychopathic might have turned down for you. And without you, saying anything bad about them, do you think that was partially because they're making a lot of money off you guys and didn't want to lose you?
Maybe they didn't want to lose us, and then at the same time, we were just like, well, just stay here, man. It was really their idea to license us to another label. We were just like, yeah, we're cool right here, bro. Back to the radio thing. Like I said, Doug Puwal was super supportive. But you know what? Honestly, like I said, that side of the business is very complicated. And he told us, he would talk about us, just randomly all the time. And then he would have our music playing in the background. Like, hey, what's up? We're doing some event at this place this weekend. Come out and hang out with us and blah, blah. We'll be broadcasting live or just anything like that. And it was often he would have our music playing in the background. But even though Doug was program director of Riff at the time, he even told us, he's like,
corporate
I
control,
can't play you guys.
Yeah.
He said he couldn't play us as much as he wanted to because it was up to higher up. At that time, Riff was part of a big conglomerate of radio stations owned by some big company, and they can't just play what they want.
Right. It wasn't like the old days at all.
Yeah. So, but we were getting a lot of plays like later in the evening and at night and stuff like that.
So you were getting the attention anyway, just not the airplay here. But that, to me, like I said, there again, that's kind of interesting. You're out of this state and you're in top 5 in some of these stations, the other markets. Were these not stations that were owned by big conglomerates at the time? Were they independent, do you think, or do you even know any of that?
I don't even know. I got to be honest, I don't know. And how it all worked and how they got us. A lot of it was requests. They would like test with anything, a product or music or whatever. They test market stuff, and they would test market, our song on some radio station, and then see how they called it phone. Back then, people used to call a radio station and request a song, and so they would just see how the phones were, and if they got a bunch of calls, okay, then they move it up into a better time slot, and then they play it more, and all of a sudden it's doing well. But we did get a lot of play on Riff. It was kind of more in other cities. Perhaps it was independent radio stations. Before Zug Izland, I was playing in a band, and we were playing at a place called Club Hell in Detroit. It was an awesome spot. I don't know if you remember that. I think it was down Woodward, like 6 in Woodward or something. It was an awesome venue, real like grungy, like late night place. And we're playing. The audience, it was like the best response we've ever had from an audience. And people were really loving it, and they're like, what's up? They're like, what? People were like in the audience, like, where are you guys from? And like, we're from Detroit. They all just went, oh. Literally, if you're an out-of-town band, if you're a Detroit band playing Chicago or a Chicago band playing Detroit, people just respect you more and they treat you different,
Yeah, that's because they may figure, wow, these guys are something. They can actually go out on the road and do this kind of thing.
Yeah, man, it was popping for a while, and good.
So what happened exactly? I mean, is the band together in any form or fashion, or are there any hopes to do anything else with it, or is it on a hiatus? What's going on with it now?
In the last, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years, we've done a bunch of shows. We've done some tours, some runs here and there. And then we've played a bunch of the Gathering of the Juggalos and Hallowicked. It's ICP's annual Halloween festival. Right. We've done all kinds of stuff like that. And then, we are slowing down. But back in 2006, I moved out of Detroit. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, pursue my studio career, to focus more time on that. Because that actually pays money.
Right, obviously. But you weren't making money at Zug Izland, all that touring and all that, or
no, not. Should I even say this? The exact amount of money that I've made from the entire thing is not very much. From 2001 to now, it's even when we were touring, playing all the time, there was no money. A lot of it, the label controlled a lot of it, and they were, recouping expenses.
Right, of course.
So sometimes we would be on a salary, like a weekly salary, when we were on tour. Mm-hmm. And then we would do shows. We would play this one theater, and we would draw over 1,000 people every time we played there. And we do it like maybe every 3 months, 1,000 people at $10 to $15 per ticket.
Yeah, that's a good amount in those days.
Yeah, that's a good amount, At the end of each night, I'm not even kidding, someone took all the money and ran. Literally just was gone every night. So, and that was, we had a door deal. We were supposed to collect the door. So every time we did this show, the money was gone.
They had their people at the door and you didn't have anybody watching it? Or you didn't have the time to do that?
They did. Like the venue would be collecting, and it's just some magical way someone managed to get their hand on the money, and by the time I go to collect it, it's like, here's $300. I'm like, what? It's supposed to be $12,000, $15,000. And so, welcome to rock and roll. So imagine, it's pretty disheartening. Things like that happen a bunch.
Did you guys have much in the way of merchandise like ICP and that? Did you guys get into that also? I mean, other than maybe t-shirts. Did you do anything much with merch?
Oh, tons and tons of merch. Because we were part of the Psychopathic Records umbrella, they handled our merch for a while, for the first 2-3 years. And I can tell you what, we were traveling around the country. We'd go to a city that we had never been to before, and at noon there'd be a line down the street every day, every venue we went to, a line of 100 people with Zug Island shirts on. So our merch was getting out, all across the country. Like I say, Montana to Florida to wherever. And then we continued to do our own merch for many years, tons of different designs, and you could find this stuff still on eBay. There's tons of stuff on eBay, always popping up.
Did you guys do any kind of when you were out of state? Did you guys go out to any record stores and doing like autograph signing of any of the merchandise, of CDs or whatever?
Yeah, we did that. Call it an in-store, and we did a whole bunch of those. Even around the Midwest. I remember even out in Denver. We would like be out there, not even performing. We're just out here signing autographs. It's why don't we just do a show? And so we did a ton of that stuff, mostly for the first Zug record, Fractiles. Yeah, and then we would do that stuff around Detroit as well.
Did you have anything as far as a certain fan base age? Was there any kind of age thing, or were there women involved, men, guys? Was there a certain group that was attracted to you as far as your shows?
Yeah, at first it was mostly juggalos.
Of course.
Because that's what we were exposed to first.
Sure.
And then when we were starting to get on the radio, even before the first record was released, we were getting some radio play around the Midwest. So we say we were drawing juggalos, and then we were drawing some civilians also. So yeah. And it was quite a mixed crowd of wild, crazy people. I'll tell you what, we were out with King's X, and man, I love that band, King's X.
Oh, I do too.
So I was just thrilled to be on that tour. But our audience hated them, and their audience hated us.
Yeah, I could see the difference.
And I'm like, why are we here? I mean, it was like 6 brutal weeks on this tour, and we were in a van at that time. And I was just like, man, we could have just gone out, because we were drawing enough people. We could have just gone out and headlined ourselves.
Sure.
And but it was great getting to know those guys.
Did they ever try and send you out on the road with certain bands or artists that they thought might be a little bit close to you? Maybe like Limp Bizkit or some of those groups from back in the day?
We did go on the one tour with the band called Dope, and I think they're real close to us. They were like hard, electronic, industrial-ish, hard rock, So I thought that was a cool tour. That was a good matchup. And honestly, we were talking, or they were talking, the label was talking, like there was a time where we almost had a opening up for a Nickelback.
Wow, that would have been big, huge.
Yeah, that would have been enormous. This was like maybe 2002, 2003. So they were still growing, but I think they were doing arenas at the time.
Yeah, that was almost their heyday.
So we almost had that, but they just wanted to see our sound scan numbers. Sound scan numbers, that means when you buy a CD, well, when those used to exist, there's a barcode on the CD. Like every product on earth, there's a barcode. But someone came up with this invention in the early 90s called sound scan. So when you buy a CD, they scan that barcode, and then that goes into the system, and that says, okay, you just bought a Van Halen CD, or you bought a Zug Island CD, or an ICP CD. And then all those acts get paid accordingly, when that was the only time they can actually keep track of record sales from that barcode. It's all computerized. So at Nickelback, there are people wanting to see our sound scans up a little bit higher before they put us on tour. And, and they went up to those numbers, and then I don't even know what happened. We were out doing our own thing at that point. But So yeah, and you know what? Our agent called us at one time and proposed us opening up for Blackie Lawless hits tour, and it wasn't even Wasp. It was just Blackie Lawless solo. And you know what? Honestly, that would have been cool. I think he's cool. I think that band is really cool. But I was like, there's no reason because their audience is like way older. You know, at that time, I shouldn't say way older, but it was a different demographic. You know, it was a different age group.
They were bigger in the 80s pop, and then all that.
We were 20 years later. You know? So I was like, I turned it, and then on top of that, Blackie Lawless wanted us to pay him $10,000. He wanted us to buy onto that tour, and I'm like, get out of here, man.
I heard different artists that had to do that. That just didn't make sense, and it really wouldn't make sense to me for a band like you guys who had been already out on the road, established yourself, could hold up with pretty much anybody. You know, why the hell they would think you'd want to do that?
Well, you know, if it was a thing like, you know, a newer band like Zug Izland, and we could go on tour and open up, play arenas every night or sold out theaters, I'd be like, well, you got to weigh that. And like, what's really the record label, you know, if they're willing to pay that kind of money, and it might be worth it. If the crowd is going to be into your music, you know, if it's going to be, you know, Blackie Lawless, who I dig, that's cool, but that crowd was not going to be into us.
And nothing against Blackie, because I like him in Wasp also, but it's not like you would be going out with Aerosmith, who it's like, yeah, your label might be interested in paying them 10 grand just to get you on a ride with them. Totally different, you know, scenario.
Yeah, and then you take a band like Aerosmith, they've got older following from the 70s, but they also got, you know, they had a hit. Their first #1 song was in the year 2000.
Right.
Imagine that. That was the first time they had a #1 song. So that was right there, you know, they're going to tap into that age group and demographic.
Was that song, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, from an Armageddon movie or something?
Yes. Yeah, that was their first #1.
That's great.
Yeah, you know,
I would have thought Dream On would have been, but I guess not.
No, not at all.
So anyway, you're in Nashville. You set yourself up in Nashville. Now, is the reason that you picked Nashville because that scene is happening more? I know a lot of guys that were in bands here in Michigan that ended up in Nashville. Mark Andrews from Seduce is in Nashville. What's up with Nashville?
That's funny because I would hang out with Mark from Seduce in Nashville a whole bunch, you know. We would hang, and he's awesome, and that's one of my favorite bands ever of all time, by the way. Seduce, freaking awesome.
I love it.
But yeah, he's down there, and then Kenny Olsen was there for a while.
Yeah.
Kid Rock, a ton of cats are down there, and a lot of people are moving from LA. A lot of like big rock guys are moving from LA to Nashville.
Yeah, it's the place to be. And I know it's a very big mishmash as far as the scene out there. There's a lot of studios, a lot of musicians, a lot of working studio musicians. What are you specifically doing there? Are you recording bands, individual artists? Are you doing commercial jingles? What are you doing as part of the studio?
My day job is producer and engineer, you know, but I'm freelance. But that was the main thing, is go to Nashville and do that kind of work. And then I also have been playing. I've gone on tons of different tours, different artists, you know, from month-long tours to weekend-long tours. So done a lot of different things like that. And like you said, there's a ton of different studios there. There's a bunch of different work. But you know what? It's all changing. Everything is changing because it's going more and more to this home studio thing.
Oh, sure.
And then back in the day, even like, I don't even know, maybe like 20 years ago, even like 15 years ago, they'd have the songwriters. The songwriter demo thing was huge. Publishing demo, I should say. So a publishing company would sign a bunch of songwriters, and then songwriters turn their songs in. They got to turn in so many songs a month or a year, and they turn their songs into the publisher, and then the publisher takes them and goes and gets them recorded, and then pitches those recordings to big artists or any artists. So, you know, there were so many studios in Nashville, and every single one of them would be booked 5 days a week and filled with studio musicians and engineers and assistant engineers. And that's, a lot of it's changing because people have a home studio, and so the songwriter will just be at home and do a recording at his place or a friend's home studio. So a lot of that work is gone now. That's changing.
It's just real interesting because, you know, Nashville and that whole area, country. It was all about country. It was all about even new country. Speaking of country, have you worked with any country artists, new country artists or anything like that, as far as recording or touring or playing with any of that?
Ton, all of the above, from engineering to producing, different country artists, touring with them, so many different things. Because, you know, for a long time, yeah, like you said, it was mostly country in Nashville, but now there's a lot of other things that have hit out of Nashville. Or, you know, I mean, everyone you can imagine is there. Dave Mustaine's in Nashville, Mick Mars, you have to see Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, you know, see him around. Even like Robert Plant, you know, he's around Nashville a lot. I don't think he doesn't live there, but he's around there a lot.
Well, he worked with Alison Krauss, so that would more or less make a little sense. Can you name drop at all maybe the most famous country artist or new country artist that you work with?
Nothing really got famous, but I did work with this artist that was just top 5 on The Voice recently. I worked with her a while ago on one of her first records. Her name is Karen Waldrop, who's just an awesome singer. I worked on her record. What is it called? Oh my God, it's been so long. What's her record?
I am not familiar with her at all, so I really couldn't tell you. I was just wondering.
It hasn't popped on like all over mainstream radio, but like I said, she was top contestant on The Voice recently.
So you haven't worked with Dolly Parton or any of those?
No, nothing like that. No. You know, honestly, I was really close to a whole bunch of different things like that around Nashville. You know, different like really big artists looking for a guitar player, and you know, I'd be talking to them and this and this and that. And,
well, that's got to be real difficult too, because there's so many top-notch musicians in Nashville. Like I said, studio cats that, you know, demand high money and just to go out and do that. Because I had somebody that, you know, I asked him, I said, you know, one of the guys I interviewed who played back in the day in the band Rob Miller called Concrete Rattle, and he's out in Nashville also. And I asked him, I said, what the hell are you doing out? Are you getting a band together? He goes, it's really tough to get a band together because so many musicians out here, they want you to pay them for being your band, the singer.
Oh, okay. No, I know JT Monroe, who was in Concrete Rattle.
Yeah.
He would actually stay with me at my house, and I'd kind of set him up in Nashville, you know.
He's in Florida now. I thought, working with Brett Michaels or something, I thought.
But Concrete Rattle, they were awesome.
Yeah.
But you know what? Almost impossible to put an actual band together in Nashville.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to get paid instantly, and if they're not, then they're out looking for those gigs. And then people are there. They're not there to start an original band, you know, like a Concrete Rattle or a Zug Island. They're there to try to get an audition with a Dolly Parton or a Kenny Chesney, you know, something like that. So, and that's, you know, kind of the goal, you know, for everybody. And the funny thing is, for me, talking to these bigger artists, you know, about a guitar spot, like I mentioned, I never even got to get to the audition. The hardest part is that every single time, you know, you're talking to an artist or their manager or something, and they end up getting a friend of someone that's already in the band.
Sure.
So they get the bass player's roommate or the drummer's cousin, you know.
Right.
You know, so to even get an audition is something.
Yeah, that would be tough. You'd have to be really knocking at a lot of doors, I imagine, because,
you really gotta know someone, or you gotta just get lucky. You know, your roommate gets a big gig. All of a sudden, you know, a year later, there's a spot opened up. You know, they call you. You know, stuff like that.
Right.
So there's no like official like some company, you know, hold an audition. It's just like bros calling up their bro.
Yeah. You know? I got one last question for you. As far as all this, are you working on anything specifically yourself as far as your own music? Are you doing any of that on the side, or do you have time to do any of that as far as putting out anything like that? I don't mean necessarily releasing it to the masses, but are you working on any music?
I do from time to time. I mostly work on other people's music, but a while ago, Zug Island re-signed our deal with Psychopathic Records, and that was like 10 years ago, something like that. And at that time, myself and the singer were both talking about putting out a solo record as well as new Zug Island records. We were both working on that kind of stuff. So I put together a bunch of music, and most of it is like weird instrumental music. I'd say like dance with wild, crazy guitar music on it, you know, like dubstep, techno with hard rock guitars. And then I got a bunch of, you know, I got some other artists to sing on some things, put vocals on stuff. So I do have that, and I add to it once in a while. And I think about release, so I got that. Other than that, I'm always doing other records. Right now, today I just finished mixing a song for an artist named Jess Ford. She's a contemporary Christian rock singer, I guess you can call it that.
Right.
Just an incredible singer. Check that out. And also, I work with, since 1997, I've been working with an artist, Eliza Niels.
Yeah, I know that name.
And, Yeah, and so I'm always working with her.
Yeah, she out in Nashville now too?
She is back and forth from Detroit to New York.
Oh,
or Jersey, like right across the bridge from New York City. So she's back and forth till she will come to Nashville. And then we just did a Florida tour not long ago. So after the Florida tour, we ended up at my studio and we were recording a bunch of new songs.
Are you actually playing with these artists? I don't mean touring necessarily, but actually playing guitar on these records, or more or less producing it?
Usually, if I'm producing something, I usually play on. Even if and I will often hire other guitar players to come in and play on records while I'm producing and engineering it. And then I'll do like guitar overdubs, or in some artists, I'll play several instruments. I'll play drums and bass and guitar and keys and stuff like that. So yeah, I do play with them. And then sometimes I go out and perform with and go on tour with.
Well, Mike, I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate talking to you today, learning a bit about the business and learning a bit more about the whole Nashville scene, which, like I say, it's just crazy to me how many people I know that are all seem to be relocated to Nashville, and I know it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. Anyway, I wish you the best of luck, and let me know if you have put out some of your own music. I'd love to hear it. It doesn't have to be like Zug Island. I don't care if you're playing classical music, because I didn't realize you were a multi-instrumentalist, which I'm sure is very important as far as producing records.
Well, cool. Thanks for having me.
You bet, Mike. You have a good night, buddy. Take care.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, that was Mike P, as he likes to be referred to, because people just seem to mispronounce his last name, and I didn't want to butcher it either. He played guitar with Zug Izland, band out of Detroit, signed to Psychopathic Records, the ICP label, more or less, with Twisted and some of the other artists. He's now relocated to Nashville, like so many others, and he's producing records with country artists, Christian artists, pop artists, to make a living. It's real interesting to hear his stories about the road and not making, even in their heyday, the kind of money that I would have expected. I'm not saying I would have expected him to be a millionaire, but to have made good money if they're playing that much. But I know there's a lot to the business that I'm not aware of because I have never been there. Hey, are you into vintage audio equipment? If you are, and you need anything repaired, you need to go see my friends at 7 Grand Audio. Don't let the sign fool you. They used to repair and still do on occasion televisions and VCRs, but their real specialty is vintage and stereo equipment. If you have a receiver sitting around that you want to get working again, go see my friends Dash and Harry at 7 Grand Audio. They're located at 25642 7 Mile Road in Redford. Phone number is 313-533-3635. Their hours Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Yeah, they can repair anything. Receivers, turntables, cassette decks, EQs. They even work on musical amplifiers for bass guitars, electric guitars, you name it. So if you need anything repaired and you want service from gentlemen that have been in business for over 40 years, to go see my friends at 7 Grand Audio. Anyway, with that being said, as they like to say, keep rocking.